Hello, hello, and welcome to Tea with Halo, the podcast of the Enchanted Academy. I am your host, Halo Quinn. I'm an author, storyteller, witch, all that jazz. And I set up the Enchanted Academy because I wanted to bring together people for conversations around magic, around enchanting your lives, or remembering that the world is enchanted, to be more precise. As a teacher and someone who has studied magic for a very long time, these are topics that are close to my heart. So I decided that it would be great fun to invite other people who both teach and learn magic and who are dedicated to, in my words, re-enchanting the world. Of course, in their own words, it will be slightly different. To come and have a chat with me about all these different things, and at the end, to share something practical that you can go away and do that will help you to tap more deeply into that magic in your life. So today we're having tea with Irisanya Moon. Hi, Irisanya. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to chat with you again. We did have a Crimson chat a year or two ago. So
We did, yes. I'm so excited to be back.
yeah.
I just had a brain moment, so I'm writing it down real quick as you were talking. So thank you for that moment. Is it my turn to do the thing where I introduce myself?
It is,
Okay.
yeah. I would love for you to tell our listeners who you are, because I could tell them who I think you are, but I'd like to hear it.
That's always fascinating, but maybe another time. Hi, folks. I am Irisanya Moon. My pronouns are she and they. I'm currently on the land of the Wapo, Southern Pomo, and Coast Miwok, which is Santa Rosa, California, USA. I am an author, witch, priestess, poet, international teacher, barely sleep kind of person, and I have two black cats. Um, at least in this present moment, some of my magical, I guess, hyperfixation is around Greek mythology, but also around heart magic and love, and how to continuously remind ourselves that love is a practice, and it's also a verb, and it's also a rebellion.
Mm. Love as rebellion. I love it. And I love your comment about like you barely sleep. I did have someone recently say to me, "You do so many things. When do you sleep?" And I'm like, "Well, this is my full-time work, right? This is the work
Yep.
of my heart and the work of my life." So, you know, and I know that you're the same.
Yes. We're very excited all the time for sort of following whatever the next thought is or whatever the next inspiration is. So sometimes sleep is not a priority. And that's the way I've always been, though. So I guess it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Rest is important, to be fair.
Yes.
Rest is
Yes,
important.
it's true. It's true. My cats will vouch for that. Yes.
Yeah. And so I imagine then that they help you to take some time out and to just sort of stop and hang out for a bit and rest in a way that doesn't necessarily look like sleep.
Yes, I'm finally getting over a cold, my first cold in 5 years. So I've been reacclimated to that being a thing. And I just could not stay upright. Like I just kept having to rest, and my cats would come to bed and they would just lay on me like
Mm.
this lovely little furry weighted blankets and reminding me that it's okay to stop. And if you do this, you can get back up. You'll probably come back, but you can rest and it's okay. I actually have this idea someday to just follow my cats one day and just do whatever they do for like a certain time period. I think it would be really fascinating.
That is so cool. And it's just that way in which our animal friends, our animal people, our pets, you know, our animal families, they're so good at love as a verb.
Oh my gosh. They're also not encumbered by the stories that we have. Or like I sometimes look at my cats and go, you have no idea what's on the news right now.
Mm.
Thank goodness, you innocent little boy. And how that must feel to worry only about how quickly mom gets up to get food. It's just so sweet and so innocent. And I also want to protect them and from the world. Um, they're really great. They're good teachers of rest and also about how to be in a really balanced relationship with other beings.
Mm.
I A friend of mine, when I first got my cats, said they might have something to teach you about attachment.
Ooh.
And yes, cats don't like if you're always in their face. They also don't like it if you ignore them completely. So you have to find that balance. And that was just a really heart opening love sort of moment where they've taught me to love the way that they need to be loved, not the way I think they do,
Mm.
like to show up exactly for who they are, not who I think they should be.
That's a really, really powerful and really important piece. It's one of those things that you hear about people who think, oh, animals don't like they're not smart and they don't have thoughts and like you can treat them as little robots. And it always makes me think, well, you clearly haven't spent 5 minutes actually being present with a cat or a dog or a rabbit, you know,
Right. Mm-hmm.
or
They have
even a
their own little
hamster.
personalities. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
had mice when I was living in university, and I had a blue mouse and an orange mouse, and I swear they were blue and orange. And the blue one
That's
was
so
really
cute.
thin, and the orange one was really fat. And the blue one lived the full 2 years you'd expect a mouse to live, and the orange one lived 2.5 years,
Oh,
right? But they were adorable. They were brothers, they played together, and you had to kind of, if you didn't want to scare them, you couldn't just like reach in and grab them. You had to kind of encounter them in ways that made sense to them.
yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
this is, it's that interaction, it's that engaging with animals that I think is really important. Um,
Mm-hmm. It helps with humans,
mhm,
remembering that, just as humans have different personalities, wants, bubbles, brain wiring, how can I meet people where they're at? And part of it is by starting with going like, okay, who are you?
yes.
Not who do I think you are? And that's a part of my magical practice overall is, a lot of my books are written about how do we meet the gods as who they are, or at least how we think they are, and work from there versus projecting onto them a lot of things that make sense, I guess, or that are sexy or that are exciting or that are nefarious, whatever. How can we meet gods? How can we, and thus meet ourselves
Mhm.
as we are? Because that's the most authentic relationship you're going to get. And I am constantly amazed and surprised by the relationships that I cultivate in that manner. It's like, oh my gosh, I have been playing on hard mode, trying to like figure out who somebody is versus just being with them and kind of going, oh, that's who you are. Okay, cool. And I'll be who I am. And that either works or doesn't. But either way, I get to just be me. And that's really a gift. It's a gift after so many years of not doing that. So
Oh, absolutely. So can you share with us a little bit? Because I talk about this a lot in my work, but I'd love to hear from where you're coming from with it about love as a verb, and how that is part of your magical practice.
yeah, I mean, I think that it's so interesting to sort of talk about it when it's sort of infused in everything. So it's sort of like when I was on a podcast the other day talking about Hestia, like what's the importance of Hestia? She's everywhere. She's important because she's everywhere. And so how do you separate those? But for me, love as an action, as a verb, it is that because it's a choice. I think that definitely I am love and I am inherently full of that. But also it's a choice to act in that. It is a choice to decide that love gets to lead the way. Often I will, ask myself, like, is this coming from a place of love? Is this coming from a place of fear? Not that one is better than the other, but where is this coming from? What is my motivation? Am I speaking to this person because I enjoy this connection? Or am I trying to get something out of it? I think more so than anything, the love as a verb is about being aware of where love arrives, where it shows up, and how you engage in it. So, for example, I think I think, not to be repetitive, but I think that one of the best action examples of love is the idea of meeting somebody where they're at and wanting to genuinely know who they are, not who they are that could be helpful, not who they are, could they be a romantic interest? Like, who are you? Tell me what's important to you. What are you afraid of? And meeting them in a place of curiosity is part of living in love. It is not, love is a huge word, it's a huge action, it's all over the place. Ask every movie, ask every book almost. It's so big. So there's no one answer to this. So walking in life, meeting my magic with curiosity is the is one of the ways that I engage with that. I think that's probably that's the big part of it. Curiosity, openness, and just
Mm.
being present for what is.
Mm. So over the years that you've been working, like consciously working with this as a practice, as a principle, you've like been bringing it into to things really consciously. How have you found that shifted the way in which you approach learning magic and doing magic and sharing magic?
Yeah. So the last time we talked about life as a love spell. So that's all part of this too. I don't want to, we can talk about that forever. But how this new sort of, and it's not really new, but it's more of a, it started when I was working with Aphrodite and I was like, oh, love isn't just one thing. Also, the goddess of love can be a jerk. And that's also true for me. Sorry to say, but it's also true. But recognizing that love is more complicated, love is more forgiving, that does inform my magic. It informs how I talk to myself
Mhm.
about what I do and what I don't do. It informs the kind of magic that I do. I tend to be a bit more focused on devotional work these days and that interrelating and with self, with gods, with others. That's another way that it's infused into action. And I think, I mean, I would say that, it's probably not beyond stepping into love that I'm also in love right now. And that is part of it too. And that's its own magic. Um, yeah. And that's been just really delightful and has been, I was married for 20 years and got divorced a few years ago. And, it's a little scary to think you're going to do that again, but I do trust that love is magic. And I met this person at an Aphrodite camp. So, it just all, it is an action and a verb and a shock and a surprise. So, and delight.
And a rebellion.
Yes,
How
that's the
is
next
love a
thing.
rebellion?
So I actually have a sticker on the back of my phone, which is why I would want to say that love is a rebellion. It was a sticker made by my friend Phlox. I just got back from winter camp a little bit ago, and they had these stickers there. And I don't think we can actually show it. There we go. Love is a
Yay.
rebellion, and it's a big old heart for folks who are just listening. Um, Love is a conscious decision to act in accordance with your own values. It is a conscious decision to stay open. It is a conscious decision to, I think, these are my definitions, conscious decision to find compassion, to find a willingness to meet people where they're at. And I know I harp on that because meeting people where they're at is one of the things that I think is really tricky in the world right now is that people want to meet people that agree with them all the time, that are on the same page, which is understandable. That's not, I hear that. But also for me, like somebody the other day asked in this Aphrodite training I'm doing, this idea of like, how is it to be a love priestess in the world as it is right now? And I said, well, that's a great question. And I think there are a lot of answers. And I think that the answer that I came up with, like, is walking in love as a rebellion is for me being able to maintain compassion and care for people that I don't agree with. Because even though I am very angry about a lot of things that are happening and will happen and have happened, at we can't do this work of abolishing patriarchy, oppression, all of that without everybody being on that team. And so at some point, people are going to be like, oh, I may have had a, I may have made a mistake in my thinking and my actions. And I think being a love priestess is being willing to meet people in that moment. And to thus fuel a rebellion, to thus continue to enact things that are rebellious, like joy, and to continuously challenge the notion that love needs to look a certain way.
Yeah.
Ergo, all of the transphobia, ergo, all of that. Like love can be a lot of effing things. So
Yeah. And it's a powerful thing to step into that place of going, well, okay, I'm not going to agree or condone what you're doing. In fact, I'm going to actively push against it, fight against it, argue against it, whatever your route is, right?
yes.
But
Yep.
that doesn't mean that I still can't hold a sense of care for the living being that you are.
Yes. I think that that's one of the things that gets so tricky about conversations about love sometimes
Mm.
is that, um, again, there's this image that comes up in your head, well, what love is supposed to look like. Well, first of all, that's untrue for a lot of people. It might be true for some folks, but love looks different. And so when talking about love, when trying to step into these places of love also has boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Love also has hard conversations. Love has what you did hurt me. I know you didn't mean it, but it still hurt. And I call that, or I think maybe I've heard it called that, one of the two is fierce love. This idea of love that is hot and sharp and meaningful and connected, but also willing to be like, yes, and that is something that doesn't work. And I'm going to hold you accountable to that. Maybe in the agreements that we have or the relationship that we have, but accountability is part of this too. It like rebellions need to be accountable to themselves and also to each other. Um, yeah, I just think that love is like often so easily like dismissed as this thing that's like, well, that's all, the chocolates and the flowers and all the stuff. And that's great. Don't get me wrong. But love is also, I think I said this on your last podcast, and I know I've said it in many other places. Love for me is the first magic. And so it's kind of like, I think it's behind the scenes. It's also the scenes. It's also the words. It's the action, all of it. Love is everywhere. And even I still have internalized stories that say, wow, that sounded cheesy. But also, why am I thinking that?
Yeah. Well, there's that the kind of ancient Greek philosopher model of the whole of reality being the two fundamental forces being love and strife. And love is
Mm,
that force that brings together, and strife
mm,
is the pushing apart. And so everything is somewhere in that balance between
mm.
love and obviously these are the English translations that I learned when I was studying it, you know, but it's that bringing together and that moving apart, and we're somewhere always, life is in between those two things and is in the process of those things. And so love has to be what that which holds all of life together, has to be love.
Mhm.
So if there is something, there has to be love.
Yep. And even if you don't ascribe to the word love or you don't want to in this moment, which makes sense, you can be totally. I always encourage folks when they're like, I don't know about that. I was like, can you get to a place of neutrality? Like, and so we can just, chat about it. But like another word that might be helpful or that is helpful for me is longing, like that
Mm-hmm.
longing for connection, that longing for um, that which you want, that which you've been separated from. There's this beautiful podcast from the Emerald about that. And it spoke to this idea of like people who are wandering, trying to find themselves, trying to find their spirit, trying to find their gods, and how in that movement, the gods change, and how in those journeys, the people change. And all this stuff about like, why do you go on journeys? Because you keep realizing you're not connected to that thing, that divinity, that God. And one of the quotes that I sort of made up after listening to this guy, I kept like, I was on a run and I kept stopping it to like take notes down. I was like, this is so amazing. Definitely worth it. I can't, it's the Wandering Gods. It's about syncretism. I can't remember the title. But one of the things that came out of it for me was that what cannot leave cannot return. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to leave in order to return. And love offers this too. Like not everything works out. Not everything is what you think it's going to be. But there are moments where you have to trust that what you are moving towards is the thing that is asking to be moved towards. Um, but also, there's a risk, and you have to take a risk. I mean, you're going to get your heart broken a billion times. It's just, it is inevitable. I feel like I fall in love and break my heart every day. And thank goodness. Like it's made me such a, like a just a more caring person and a more willing person to show up for things that I care about and and to also be, I don't want to, say this and then completely go back on it, but it's, I think it helps me be resilient in this world, even beyond all of the heightened, what feels heightened right now in the political oh, landscape. But um, love still exists in all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And the rebellion is that I can choose to see that. I
Yeah.
can actually choose to see that a lot of the motivations are out of love of things that may be odd there, not the things that I'm focusing on loving, but I can see that. And I can see that undercurrent. And I can, okay, like we can all sort of chat and meet each other where we're at. We might be able to understand that so much of what we're talking about is similar.
Yeah.
And the rebellion is going like, wait, what if I'm not alone in all this? What if?
Yeah. What if actually we all do care? Even the people who are choosing different paths to try and, you know, or being very misguided as far as I'm concerned, to put it bluntly, like they're often coming from a place of care, even if that is expressed through fear.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Because fear is also an act of often trying to protect oneself, trying to protect one's family, trying to protect the people and the things that you care about, trying to protect what it is so that you don't all like crumble down.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of fear can actually be that manifestation of trying to protect. And this is why in my classes when we're working with the deities of love and we work with the red goddess in
Mm-hmm.
like and that lineage of
Mm-hmm.
deities, you have Inanna, you have Ishtar, you have Babylon, you have Aphrodite,
Yep.
you
Mm-hmm.
have Freya, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
all of these goddesses are both goddesses of love and passion and sexuality and pleasure and of power and
War.
boundaries and war. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People want to skip over that.
Mm.
It's all these. I think maybe not all folks. Don't fact check me on that, but many of the love gods will often have that feature of that because war is often about fighting for what you love, and that and fighting is part of that in some cases. I think it's so funny when it's so quickly dismissed as being something that can be a part of the conversation. Like, have you not fought for something that you really loved? I know I have. I haven't grabbed a sword, but I have definitely fought for things. I have definitely, like, I felt like I gave some blood for that, but I think I did. I think I may have at some points, but it's energy. It is life force,
Mm.
right? Like that's really like what I think people want to diminish in a lot of the goddesses that sort of like they're just love. That doesn't mean they're not a badass too, but like because I think that it's easier to want to diminish that and to just go, well, you just hang out in love and just be all pink and soft and stuff. But
Yeah.
also Aphrodite has an epithet of war. It says several that are really speaking to power. She also, is often Aphrodite Pandemos of the people is often the one who travels with like a daemon. It depends how you want to say this. A peitho, Peitho, which is persuasion.
Mm.
And you do need persuasion in the realm of the world and bringing people together. There are stories or there's writings about Aphrodite being the goddess to call on to bring the people together from different areas of Greece and using persuasion. And that's not, I think sometimes people go like, oh, no, that's manipulative. I mean, a lot of things are manipulative, to be fair. Well, I'm sure we do it all every day. But persuasion it's a tool that is fierce love. It is, hey, these are the things that are important. Let's all do this together.
Mm-hmm. And I think just to go back to your piece, it's not just about people wanting to make small love and make the goddesses of love small. It's also that our modern perception of war is very different to historical. So it's only really been the more recent like period of time, um, the world wars and in Europe and those pieces, like since our technology got to a point and the perspective got to a point where these things were done on massive scales rather than face to face, where the people sending the soldiers rather than soldiers off to fight, it can be over war, over greed, over and the people leading it are very, very far away from actually what's happening. Whereas historically, they're the kind of war that is connected to these goddesses to love is that defending your land is the rhetoric that we use to justify the wars today, but is not actually what those wars today are about. So
no, it was much more personal. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of separation and distancing, because that makes it easier for the folks doing things, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But again, that separation will get you. So
yeah. And it's all of those pieces as our modern, I say our modern, I'm using these terms very generally, like the culture that I'm in, where you are over in the States, like we share a thing where we've made love just about chocolates and roses and ignoring the keeping each other accountable and those pieces. We've made it about a sentiment rather than an action and a care, an expression of care, all of those pieces. And
we've
we
also made it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just saying, when we've done the same with many of the other powers of the other deities, the other archetypes, the other forces in the world. We've done it with love, we've done it with war, we've twisted it into something else. And I say we, like the powers that be that love is a rebellion against, have done this
Mm-hmm.
separated.
Oh yeah. Well, there's two tangents I want to go off on, but like, yeah, speaking to how love has been portrayed, it has been translated through folks who have certain ideas of what love looks like, right? Or what it should look like. And so that informs like what we hear, what we see again and again. All this stuff has been, a lot of the source texts have been inspiration for movies and TV shows and things like that. But they're also source texts that have their own agenda
Mm-hmm.
and are usually by white academic dudes. And so that impacts how love shows up and how it is spoken about and how it is enacted. And this actually dovetails into the other thing I was thinking is that, when I think in a lot of conversation, especially around the gods, maybe just in society, love often is romantic love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the only one. Greeks definitely have more than that. But like love is not just that. And also we have a society, I think in Western society especially, where romantic love is the penultimate thing that you are supposed to shoot for, and there is nothing else. If you don't do that and you don't do it well, you have failed as a human. What a disappointing thing, because love shows up in so many other ways. It is in friendships, in our cats, in food, in the work that I do, in family, in the ocean that I go to. Like, love is also just this, it's the enchantment, right? Like, it's the connection to that. It's the reminders of that magic that's surrounding. Love is not just like, I got to get married, especially for those of us socialized female and all of that. Like that, uh, that is a whole thing. But I think that, like, really recognizing what your definition of love is helpful in this whole process of sort of like maybe bringing it into more focus, or bringing it into your acts of rebellion, bringing it into your self-devotion, or self-care. But how am I defining that? And maybe just just a nudge, maybe expanding that a little bit into, well, where else could love be? Where else could it live? Where else could it show up? And how can I go meet it there and find out more?
Mm. And that's that piece about being a love witch in hard times, about being a priestess or priestess of, or priest of love, you know.
It's a thing. Like, I had gotten to starting to know Aphrodite in, don't hold me to this date. It's probably in a book that I wrote, 2014-ish. I don't know, 13, 14, something like that. And yeah, and then a few years later, I got divorced and thought, I can't be a priestess of this. And I was like, wait, why not? Why is that? It's just an interesting thing to like question, like, where is this coming from? Like, why do I think that? And often when there's a thought like that that feels incredibly like unchangeable, I sort of think, who told me that?
Mm.
And I don't know, for me, this is the joy of all this love stuff. The joy of it is that it's slippery and that it is, we can't, like, I'm not going to try to define it. I'm like, it is its own entity.
Mm.
It is, I think, often a soft place, but also a place where I have been challenged to grow in ways that I didn't know I had to. It is, I think, from all my magical work and all of my relationship building with Aphrodite and going through all of these things in my own heart, in my romantic life, in my family life, and all of this, and the world, etc. I Love allows me and invites me and encourages me to be a kinder person.
Mm.
It encourages me to stop and think about if what I want to say is actually the thing to say right now. It has challenged me and potentially emboldened me to speak from my heart about things that I do like, that do bring me joy, even though somebody else doesn't like them. That's fine. But it's those things. Like, I said on my social media recently that the memory popped up on Facebook, and it was me going to Australia in February of 2024, and I went to see Taylor Swift. And because I found like this really cheap deal, and like I have friends in Australia, so I was like, I'm gonna go. And that was a moment of like, I love myself enough to go to this concert by myself. And it was just, I don't know, it's like probably the best date with myself I've ever had. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to, that's gonna be a hard one to surpass. But it's about that too. Like, love is life. And like, I don't know if I get to do this life thing again. So why not fall in love with all the things? Why not? Why not do things that seem ridiculous? Maybe not, you know, bankrupt yourself, but like, and maybe it's not about like, going off into these various things, but it's like how, like if love, I don't believe in the you have to love yourself to love someone else thing, but I do believe that me continuously working on my relationship to love does make me a person who connects more easily to folks and more authentically and to the folks that I actually want to hang out with. Um,
Yeah.
because, if you're faking it, surprisingly, sometimes you attract folks that aren't quite in alignment, you know, sarcasm for folks who might not read that.
Surprisingly, yes.
Shocking.
Yeah, no, it is so true. And I've seen it so often in people, and they're like, oh, I can't find my people. And I'm like, well, are you being your people, or
Yeah,
are you
that's real.
pretending to be someone acceptable?
Well, that's the thing too. Love as a rebellion is rebelling against the idea that I have to like everybody
Yes.
and that everybody has to like me. That's not
Important.
actually, I have not said that in any of, I've said love and I've said compassion for folks. I don't like everybody and everybody likes me, which is fine. and,
Yeah.
but like, it's a rebellion against this idea of like, you have to do this. It has to look like this. You have to just grin and bear stuff. No, you don't. You can actually have boundaries and you can have ways that you like to be loved that you can tell other people.
Mhm.
And they could say, oh, I'd love to do that, or I can't. And that's okay. It's not about you, it's that they can't. But you could actually be a person that puts yourself out there and says, like, hey, like, I know that you want to love me. I'm going to tell you how. Here you go. I have this plan to do like the care and feeding of Irisanya for like my friends. I think I wrote about it in one of my books a while ago, and I haven't updated that in a while. But sort of like, here's what happened. Like when I'm mad, this is how you can love me. When I'm sad, this is how you can love me. Like,
Mm.
etc. But that requires having self knowledge of how I am, and also like there's a it even as I'm suggesting it, like I'm sitting here going like, oh, that feels so vulnerable. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it does.
It is, because if you tell people this is how you can love me and these are the things that will hurt me, please don't do them. You have to trust you're handing over those pieces. You have to trust that they're not going to deliberately choose to hurt you with them. You know.
Exactly. I mean, I'm willing to meet people in their, I've made a few mistakes in my life. I'm willing to go like, yeah, totally. We're all going to make mistakes at some point. And I'm more than willing to like sit and like try to understand, but also go, yeah, I understand where that's coming from, but don't do it again.
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
I would really, that's not a cool thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think like it's the dialogue, it's the connection, it's the action, it's the ongoing like love is not like you fall in love and then you're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we grow, we change, thank goodness. And we also get to often experience and witness someone else's growth. And that is a gift because people don't have to show that to you and they don't have to be on the same trip as you. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm saying all this, I'm just welling with like emotion about it because I think like it's just magic. It just is, and you don't need anything to do it.
So how does all this play into and play along? Because I agree totally. Like that, you come into that point of opening your heart, of being present with other people, whether that's partners, friends, cats, or deities, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or like the beings of the world. So you're coming into that space, like that in itself is opening to the magical, and it changes your consciousness, it changes your life. So like that is an active act of magic. It is
Mm-hmm.
life as a love spell, as you speak about so often. So how does this feed into the way in which you would build relationship with deities, and where would someone start with something like that?
Oh, so hilarious. And I've actually not said this to Halo before we got on the podcast. We had a little chat that, of course, neurodivergence sweeps us away sometimes. Um, so I have a lot of thoughts about how to build relationships with deities, and I actually am contracted for a book on that too. And you know, it just got it just got accepted.
Yay.
I have been getting over a cold, so I just keep having to pause to clear my throat real quick. Um, so my thoughts about this look a lot like how one might approach a romantic relationship or a friend relationship with a human. And I am not going to turn this into a sales pitch, but I think what is true about the book is that it's going to talk about how to build a foundation of trust first, and how to learn from the gods about their stories and about how they're talked about, just as we would with a person, in order to have more questions, in order to go like, does this feel like a good fit or does it not? But I think that people wanting to do this can really just think about like, how have you grown your human relationships? I find it really interesting that we sort of like push that to the side as soon as we talk about the gods, because the gods are different. I mean, yeah, but also I personally don't believe in the hierarchy of gods. I don't ascribe to that. Like I think we're all like kind of on this team together, and we're going to build relationships. And to build relationships, we need some trust. We need clarity about like what I'm looking for in this relationship, getting really clear about that, and also being clear about what do I bring to the relationship. A lot of God relationships, or relationship building is often, I describe it as, well, if I just put enough money into this machine, I will get a gumball. And that is not, for me, a very healthy way to approach relationships with gods or with people. I want to do something that's more reciprocal. So thinking about like, what do I bring to the table for this relationship too, which is an interesting conversation to have. And then, what do you actually want from the gods? Be upfront, be clear, and how is this relationship going to work? I think that, even if folks don't ascribe to this, polyamory offers like a really great, like not outline, but like structure for how to build relationships sustainably, like when done in a healthy way. There are crappy people everywhere. But like, how do you do this? Like you figure out what your agreements are. You figure out figure out when you're going to hang out. You figure out what every person likes. You figure out like how to change things if it's not working for one person all of a sudden. And so my book's going to talk a lot about that. But for folks who are just doing this, getting to know a god, reading their stories, sitting with them, building an altar, and just being with them. I think another part of this whole love conversation is that society sometimes teaches us it has to be instantaneous and we have to have like a really deep, awesome connection in the first couple of weeks. That could happen, sure, but I don't think I would encourage folks to think of the gods as like a slow burn relationship. We're slowly introducing each other to your lives. I am a hypocrite with this, with Aphrodite. However, I think that it's probably a better practice to just slowly spend a few minutes at an altar, just being in the presence without trying to do anything or trying to make it sparkly or whatever. Just like, and just sitting there, maybe reading stuff about them and reading it out loud, maybe making up a song, lighting a candle. Like, really, this is your practice and your relationship. So I think there's this sort of finding out period that is helpful, but it'll hopefully continue. It's not like you meet somebody and you stop learning about them. But like, I think that that's really the important part, is making space for this to be a possibility. Because we're busy people. Even if we're not busy, it feels busy a lot. How can I create maybe a physical space, but also a time container where we're just going to hang out and we'll just see how it goes? Does it still feel good? Great. Then maybe you try doing maybe you sing some songs together. Maybe you look through old stories, or many people have done so many devotional handbooks where people have their examples of things that they've done, rituals and spells and such. That might be fun. But I think it's your relationship. So figure out what works for you and them. Um, Aphrodite for me just basically always wants another altar. She's like that. Goodness. I am teaching an Aphrodite class right now, a couple of them, and I suddenly have more statues of my dear love. Oops. But I think that that's like also this is fun. Like, how can you have fun? Like, if this is going to be so serious and regimented, I wouldn't stick with it. So I will not suggest that. I think it's beautiful that there are books out there that do that. I think that's amazing. I think that that works for a lot of folks. I have a brain that doesn't work like that. My brain likes newness and excitement. It also likes structure. So I have to look at building relationships with gods as something that happens in small pieces and just over time. And I've worked with gods that I only worked with for a little bit and then I just don't. It's like I jokingly say sometimes like, oh, I'll see them on the street and I'll wave or I'll like their Facebook post, but we don't really hang out anymore. But yeah, look to the relationships that you feel really good about in your life and how did that happen?
Yeah.
And that often includes conversations that are hard and tricky and where you have promised a whole bunch of things and you didn't actually follow through. And so you got to renegotiate. You got to go like, okay, that was maybe I can't do all that. Maybe it's something different. Anyways, I could talk about that ad nauseum, but I think that's a good start. First of all, just get in there. If there's one thing that I feel sometimes emanates out of the current witchcraft timeline is that like people are often asking like, oh, like how do I do this? I don't want to do it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And just no, just if there was one thing I wanted to hear when I was a baby witch, like which I'm not the biggest fan of that term, but it's that just do it. Like it's okay to make a mistake. It's fine. And even quite frankly, who's judging this mistake? Like what where did you learn that?
Yes.
Who did you hear that from? I just be have fun. This is supposed to be fun. In my opinion, my version of magic and love magic is fun. It is, I am Aphrodite Philomedes. I am not Aphrodite of solemnity or whatever the right word is. But
Yeah, I'm just remembering, and this is going back to cats as amazing teachers again. So when I was growing up, I had a very, very young brother. He was 2 at the time, maybe. So he was sort of crawling around. And we had a cat with a very, very fluffy tail, very fluffy tail. And my little baby brother would sit in the kitchen with the cat, would grab hold of this fluffy tail and drag the cat across the floor. And the cat would just go, and you could just tell Buster, the cat, black and white fluffy cat, it was called Buster. And you could just tell that he understood. The cat wasn't very old either. It was like maybe a year old at this point. But he understood that my little baby brother didn't mean any harm, wasn't trying to hurt him, was just going soft and fluffy and pulling. And it wasn't yanking, it was pulling steadily, so it was okay. So the cat just very patiently, and then when my baby brother would let go, Buster would disappear off out the cat flap and go, no, I've had enough now. And on the very, very rare occasions that my baby brother would tug too hard by mistake, the cat would claws retracted, would bat him and just go, no. And the rest of us, if we stood on his tail or like did something he didn't like, you'd very soon find out, right? He would tell you. But this is the thing about cats, about gods who are also very self-possessed. They recognize where we're at. And if we're just toddlers crawling around, they recognize that when we fall over or we say we're going to do something and we mess it up, that we're just learning. They can see that. It doesn't matter how old we are in human terms, they can see that. And so they will have a lot of forgiveness for it. And they might give you a gentle tap and go, look, it's not the way we do it. Or, okay, how are you going to make amends? Because you are actually a grown up. Um,
Mm.
but they're not going to turn around and rain hellfire on you just because you made a mistake. This is one of the reasons that gods are great spirits to work with, is because they're actually very human and they're very human friendly. Most of them,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Well, there's always exceptions.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I really think that's true. And I think that, it's such a remnant of Christianity and other Judeo Christian traditions to sort of have this punishing figure that sort of keeps folks in line. But that's, and I understand why people still ascribe to that because governments are often like could be viewed like that too. And so it does feel like a dynamic that's true. And so challenging that is hard. But also, like when you're in a friendship or you're in a partnership or whatever, like if you have a hierarchy in which you are afraid to do something wrong, that doesn't feel like a safe moment for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it feels like um yeah, I think that the gods are also really good to work on attachment things with too, because I think that in terms of their self-possessedness, the first person I think of is like Artemis. Like I just think that that's, they're pretty straightforward, and that asks you to be straightforward,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be hard. It can be challenging. And I also think that there's so many more gifts of that, of wisdom, of insight, of inspiration, that it's worth it. I really have not found gods to be, I mean, I don't know, they're pretty wrapped up in their own stuff most of the time. Uh, I don't know. The Greeks are often busy with their own stuff. But yeah, no one is going to come down and smack your hand. Honestly, the being that's going to do that the most is you, and or people whose opinion you don't want. And so I would just say go out and do things. Just do them, try them. Like I think books are a really great place to start, because authors. But I think that I think I say in every single one of my books, like, this is just a starting point. Go off and do whatever, friend. Like, I think that's great. Like, somebody asked me the other day, like, a question about Aphrodite, and I said, here's the thing, I hate answering questions directly about relationship building, like with certain gods, because I have very strong opinions. And I would rather you build a foundation on what is important to you and your personal gnosis, because that is going to be much more satisfying than necessarily taking on someone else's. And like mine might be inspirational, but like in the end, it's between you and the God. So that's up to you.
Yeah, 100%. I like that piece about approach them. It's that whole thing all the way through this approach with presence. Just be present, make space for that relationship, and then pay attention, basically. Like,
How many times do I need to be reminded of that in relationships? Pay attention. I mean, that is like the biggest thing. When I finally realized that, it's like, oh, yeah, I've been making things challenging. And also I've been expecting other people to do that. So maybe, we all grow and learn, and love has a lot of space for that.
yeah, yeah, it really does. So this has been really lovely. I've got one other question that I really wanted to ask you, and this kind of it ties into what we've been talking about, but it also relates to the work that you share in your book on Hestia and the work that I know that you also do in the tradition that we share reclaiming, and that is about community, right? So as far as I'm concerned, community, magical community is really important, especially in the times that we're in. And there's this interesting piece that we're living in an unusual time in that we can connect up across the world globally. And if we're lucky, we can have like local people and in-person people, and we can travel to places and see in-person people. So there's all different forms of community. And I feel like we need that. In fact, I know we need that as human beings, and it really is really supportive. So my question to you is, what can we do if we are part of a community, or if we're looking for community, in order to help strengthen those connections, those relationships with other magical people?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, it's such a great reminder because we don't do, hopefully, this work alone. And like you said, we're not actually humans built for that. That's a whole other thing. But um, building community allows you to have places that are safe and allows you to have connections that can hold you in difficult times and vice versa. You could provide that to other folks. I think that the best ways of building community in this moment are to look to, I mean, if you already have like a practice, like a group or your own, being willing to like organize things of, and this might be a little, I don't know, risky, I guess to say, but just get along and hang out. Like there's so much focus on like, well, we have to organize and we have to do all things. Yeah, totally. But if you don't like hang out and are comfortable with people that are in your circle, that's going to be harder. And so one of my spiritual mentors like taught me this. Like, so in the beginning, when I was starting out in reclaiming, which I didn't say in my intro, yes, I'm a reclaiming witchcraft initiate. Oops. And uh, one of my mentors, Copper Persephone, who died in 2020, she uh, had this way of building community. And so she started doing all these classes. So all of us would have these classes. So eventually we'd be able to teach. And then, but one of the things she also did is there was a ritual planning cell for the local area. And asked, we'd have meetings, so we'd plan rituals. But a lot of the planning meetings were us just hanging out and having a potluck because if there's anything that witches and pagans do well is potlucks. But it is about building community from a space of meeting people where they're at. Like, who are you as a person versus just like, what can you do? Like, what's the magical talent that you bring? Who the hell cares? Like, I want to know, like, what are your worries? Like, what are your, why? um, why is work so hard right now? And I think that that is actually the beginning of community. So it could be around people that you already know, but also your local community of like, hey, I just want to get together with people who share some of the same, interest as me. It could be as simple as that. It could be as simple as when you're out on a walk in a park, like just making some small talk with somebody, joining a running club. It actually doesn't matter, but like finding community and finding these places of just talking to people and getting to know them. And thus, maybe that becomes more of the spiritual practice, but really, community is just community outside of anything else. Community is a collection of people who have often shared values and goals. And that can start anywhere. It could also be online, having a video call once a week of like, hey, let's just all get together and share where we're at. It doesn't have to be anything hugely complicated. It doesn't have to be especially meaningful, but it will be just by saying like, hey, I want to connect with folks because maybe you have some particular reason. And I would put that out there and just say, hey, I want to do this. Um, but yeah, I think that society often wants I think wants everyone to be isolated and thus afraid. And that is an easier way to control people. It works. It just does. And so making even small little connections is a wise thing. Talking to the people you already talk to, like I'm sure that there are people in my life that I just can't think of right now, apparently. But like the same people I see all the time, the pharmacist, whatever. But like just like connecting with people in small ways, I think is really helpful. And it reminds all of us that we're all connected in some way. I might not know everything that you're up to, but community building doesn't have to be challenging and have 1,500 meetings. It can just be, we're going to go eat some food together. We're going to go to a park. We're going to get on a Zoom call and we're going to chat about stuff. And maybe we'll end up organizing some political stuff. Who knows? But right now, let's just get to know each other so I can know if I can trust you, so I can know that you can trust me.
Yeah, I think that's a really important bit, and the fact that you've just ended on that to know if I can trust you and you can trust me. And that's where we meet in that human space, in that people with people space. Yeah. The same with being with cats or dogs or hamsters.
Exactly. Exactly. I'm actually shocked my cats haven't come in here at any point. Usually they have an appointment to sit in my lap during this time. So unclear what the change in schedule is, but
Well, I'm disappointed to have not seen a tail or two ripple through the pillars in
oh,
your
one of them has
background.
such a fluffer. One of them has quite a fluffy tail, but he wanted to snuggle with his brother this morning, which is not what they usually do. So
Oh.
I'm gonna let them do that. So
So, what would you like to share with our listeners as something practical that they can go away and do after they've listened to this episode, other than go and see where you can hang out with people and be present?
yeah, yes to that. So I have said this quote so many times that I'm sure people are think that I said it. I have not. This is by Mary Oliver. There is a quote that I found that's called "Attention is the beginning of devotion." It was in one of her books. Now I can't remember what it is, but I think that one of the best, maybe one of my favorite practices, let's say, is the idea of calling my attention back to what's important. And if we're talking about love, which we are, but this could be applied to a lot of things, calling my attention back to where love actually shows up. You might think of this almost like a gratitude practice where you're just like focusing on specific examples of, what you're grateful for. But what I might offer is maybe during the day or at the end of the day, maybe just sitting with myself, and maybe it's, has a fancy candle attached to it if you want to. I just found these amazing rose scented ones, and that's delightful. But just really sitting and thinking, you don't have to write it down if you don't want to, but like, where did love show up for me today? And then maybe just taking a beat with that. And if you're not quite sure, just naming something that felt like love to you. I mean, this is a practice of uncovering and sort of expanding the definition of stuff. Because I don't know about you, but when I do gratitude journals, sometimes they get very interesting because some days I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And so it's like coffee, the fact that I have Advil. And so how did love show up today? But also, bonus, how did I show up for love? How did I maybe connect with someone? How did I stop, collect my thoughts before sharing something with someone that might be challenging? How did I show up for that cause that I love? Or, it could be anything, but how did love show up? How did I show up for love? And the practice for me is about, again, calling back attention and putting the emphasis on love, not at the dismissal of other things, but also what I think this does is that fills me up with that energy and allows me to become slash maintain a sense of resilience and a sense of what's really important, and maybe an inspiration for how I might act tomorrow if I felt like I wanted to do more. This is not a judgment. There's no certain way to do this, just to be clear. However, I know that I can get inspired when I'm like, oh, this happened today. I wonder what I could do tomorrow.
And I love that. Like one of the pieces that you mentioned earlier as well is that sometimes showing up for love is holding a boundary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sadly, more than I thought, but yes.
Well, it's
But
that
true.
it's that interesting thing, isn't it? That we're all coming from slightly different places. We've all developed slightly different ways of coping with things, of dealing with the world, different attachment styles, different ways of loving, different languages, different cultural expectations, different gendered expectations, all of
Mm-hmm.
that different expectations based on race, all of the different layers that are in there. Um, and so we can take from these, it's the case of, as you said, just to sort of pull these pieces together, knowing yourself, knowing where you're starting, knowing what you need to be doing, what you need to work on, knowing what you choose to work on. And once you know where you are, you can then make choices in alignment. I love that you said that sometimes we are acting out of love and sometimes we're acting out of fear. And neither of those are wrong. But when we recognize where we're acting from it, then we get to choose better. We get to understand ourselves better. We get to then to follow this on a little further, to begin to shape the world magically with that knowledge, with those energies, with those impetuses moving us.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, thank you for summing that up so well, and also probably highlighting the fact that everything that Halo just said is actually what I also said about building relationships with gods.
Yeah.
Because I believe that building a relationship with myself, I believe that I am also of God. I am like, I also deserve to know what my stories are. I also deserve to know like who told them to me and in what translation. And also, like, why not have a special space for myself? Like, I've had altars to myself before. Why the heck not? Um, yeah, I just wanted to bring that in because that's my other thing. I don't remember if I talked about it with you the last time, but I probably did. Self-devotion is just my thing as opposed to self-care because I just feel like it's elevates it a second for me. Um, but yeah, and all this love stuff is about relationship to thing. And I would say that if there's another bonus question to ask yourself, like how am I relating to my life right now, or my heart, or whatever? But like that's an interesting question, and it doesn't really have a yes or a no. It's how are you doing it? And in that awareness, perhaps you want to shift something, perhaps not.
Mm. Thank you. That's absolutely beautiful. It's been a beautiful conversation and some really important themes in there that I think really support how we weave magic in the world, how we work to weave an enchanted world, to re-enchant our lives, remember that, and to give us a foundation from which we can do magic in more traditional forms as well. When we're in that space of coming from love and aware of and self-knowledge and choice, then those sort of more traditional formats of charms and spells and formulas and this, that, and the other can be in service of and in alignment with that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. This has been absolutely lovely.
So where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I have a very delightful website that was built by a friend of mine, and it is my name. So it's www.irisanyamoon.com. It will have my books, it'll have my classes, it has a whole bunch of me talking about myself. That was an interesting endeavor, and probably other beautiful things as we go along. That is the main place that you can find most stuff. I'm on all the social media if you're into that. I also have a weekly, if not more than weekly, Substack that I write, and it comes out on Mondays. It's Heart Magic, and that is irisanya.substack.com. You can sign up on my website, but that is a place where I tend to just get inspired by some quote, and then I write a bunch of things. And sometimes it is about the time, sometimes it's has magical sort of practices in it. And sometimes I'm not actually sure sometimes what I get inspired by, but I do. And I like writing there. And it's free. You could be a paid subscriber, but it's free. In terms of like stuff that's coming up, those are the places that you would find all the things. But what I do know, or I'm pretty darn sure about, right now I'm in the middle of, when we're recording this, I'm in the middle of like a year-long Aphrodite priestess training. It's online and it's going really, really well. I mean, I'm a little biased, but I'm going to be starting that again probably in August of 2025 because the previous cohort will be done in July. So I would keep an eye out for that. Also, there are plenty of ideas whirling. I usually do a lot of work with deity. I do reclaiming classes. I'm often at witch camps or other conventions, things like that. But in this particular moment, there are some things that are not quite finished. I'm also writing a whole bunch of books right now. And so I have taken on a bit, which I'm very excited about. I was going to take a break this year, and then the world became what it was. And I said, if I don't have something to do that fills me with joy and love, then I don't want it. So I've gone in the opposite direction. Yeah, and I think when this comes out, a few months after that, I think November of 2025, my book on the Greek pantheon is coming out, and it is. I worked real hard on that book, and I'm very proud of it. So, just gonna put that out into the ether.
Excellent. That would be a good place for people to start to find stories and inspirations for how to begin working with the Greek gods if they call to you.
It's much more focused on a bit of that. We just talk about a lot of gods, a lot of gods. There's a lot of gods in there. Yeah.
Oh, no, that sounds wonderful. So, for people that would like to find you, I will make sure that your website is linked below in the description for this episode. But that's irisanyamoon.com for anyone who is listening and can't be bothered to look at the words there.
Fair.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, Irisanya, for joining me. It's been a
Thank
delight
you.
as ever.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in to Tea with Halo and Irisanya Moon. If you enjoyed and you think you might enjoy some more, then hit like, throw us a comment, subscribe, press all the buttons, share it with a friend that you feel would benefit from a conversation about love and devotion and just being where you are and meeting the gods where you are and where they are and being in community in the same way. If you'd like to come and join an online community, then check out the link in the description for the Enchanted Academy. We have a free community and there are conversations in there. There are monthly fairy magic circles, conversations on live circles on Eros magic and divine love, and various other bits and pieces. So you are very welcome to come and just join the conversation and hang out. And that goes for you too, as well, Irisanya. Do come and join.
Yeah. That'd be delightful. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who's been listening or watching. I always like to remember that people have other things in their lives besides listening to these things. So I appreciate your the time that you have offered and your attention.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So until next time, may your
Yeah.
path be enchanted and filled with beauty, balance, delight, and love.
Bye, folks.